Hello world, Shelly here, and today I am coming at you barefaced because we are going to talk about the best primers for blurring pores. These are my favorite selections that I think should be good for normal combo oily skin as well as dry skin. I've got normal to dry skin this time of year. This is probably the only time of year when it's nice and humid out that I can say I'm almost normal, almost normal, mostly dry. But I think with one exception here, these would be good for all skin types. Now, when you are shopping for primers, typically the way they are marketed, you will see claims like hydrating primer or illuminating primer or blurring primer. We're looking for the blurring ones in most cases. The hydrating ones won't often have the blurring properties to them. Not to say a blurring primer can't be hydrating or a hydrating primer can't be blurring, but I have a drawer full of hydrating primers that don't do much for blurring purposes. The illuminating ones, same kind of situation, and potentially accentuating pores depending on whether they are using some kind of a sheen to give you the illuminating factor. If they do, that often makes pores look more obvious if you've got larger, more prominent pores. So you're really looking for the ones that say blurring. Now, you can find them in silicone-free or silicone-based. I have no aversion to silicone. I don't have any sensitivity to it. I actually really enjoy a lot of silicone primers, so I'm not avoiding them. There are some silicone-free options in here, but oftentimes you'll hear people with oily skin say, oh, I don't want to use the silicone primers because those will clog my pores. Well, in reality, the silicone molecules are too big to clog your pores. They're actually not going to clog them. They're going to stay on the surface and help blur things out. So don't be afraid of a silicone primer if you're not sensitive to it. Just because you have oily skin, you're not going to be clogging your pores up with silicone primers. That's just not typically going to be a thing. I've got some old favorites here. I've got some newbies to the block, and let's just get into it. We'll start with a couple from the drugstore. So this is the CoverGirl Simply Ageless Anti-Aging Primer, and a lot of times the anti-aging primers have the double benefit of having some skincare in there that helps with anti-aging and also potentially blurring of texture. A lot of these do blur texture as well as pores. It's kind of like if it's good at blurring pores, it's probably good at blurring texture as well. The reverse is not always true. You can get ones that blur texture nicely but still don't really behave well with pores. All of these behave well with both. The Simply Ageless is a really nice drugstore option. It does a good job of blurring pores. It's not my absolute favorite. I will tell you my favorites as we get to them, but it is still a really good option, and ever since CoverGirl went cruelty-free, that makes it even better in my book. Next one I've got here is the L'Oreal Age Perfect Blurring Face Primer. Now, I am a big fan of the entire Age Perfect line. Their Age Perfect foundation in the tube like this is gorgeous and beautiful. This primer is no exception. It's a very nicely smoothing primer. It blurs pores really well. It's not a 100% blur, but it is a very, very nice finish. And the only downside is I wouldn't really wear it on its own. It's got that sort of a rosy tint to it, and so I would typically wear that underneath makeup. Next up, from Wet n Wild, this is the Impossible Primer. I am almost out of it, as you see. This is one of my favorite primers right now. I am loving this one. It is silicone-free, but it performs so much like a silicone-based primer that I really have a hard time believing it's silicone-free. It's super comfortable, it does not dry me out, and it does an amazing job at blurring pores, blurring texture, extending the wear of makeup. It is just this really impossible primer. It really, really is. And at this price point, I mean, come on. Hello, Wet n Wild. What are you doing to me? I'm loving ya. I'm loving ya. It's my favorite right now. It's one of my favorites. One of my favorites. Next up, I've got one from Touch in Soul, and if you don't like the feeling of a silicone primer, that thicker feeling, this one feels more like an essence. It's like a liquidy sort of consistency, which for other primers would typically mean that it's not going to be very blurring, but for some magical reason, this one does a really good job at blurring pores. Again, it's not the 100% blur, it's not the best of the best, but it does a really good job, and I think it is definitely worth mentioning because of the fact that it is not one of those thicker silicone style primers. It's more of an essence, and it's more of a liquid, and it does a really good job at blurring pores. So there you have it. Next up, we have one of the just holy grails of pore blurring. Now, this is the hydrating version, but it's the Benefit Professional. And I like both versions. I switched to the hydrating one when it came out. They both perform equally well. This is the one that for many years on this channel I described as Photoshop for your face. It really, really is. It also does a gorgeous job underneath your under eyes. Same with the Wet n Wild Impossible. I take both of them under my eyes as primer, and they are just phenomenal at smoothing over lines. But the pore blurring in this Benefit primer, this whole line, the Professional and the Hydrating Professional, just spectacular. Another favorite. It is way up there in pore blurring in my book. Then we've got, if you've been around this channel for a while, you have seen me use many, many tubes of this primer. This is the Strivectin Line Blur Effector. This stuff, it's been around forever, and it's a bestseller, and it's so worthy of being a bestseller. This is, having tried all of these side by side again today, just now, oh, I forgot how awesome it is. I mean, it is probably the best one on this table. It does have a close by rival, but it's probably the best one I've got right here. Line Blur Effector, hands down my favorite. This next one I recently picked up at Sephora. It's from Callie Ray, the So Blown Clean Blurring Primer with Collagen Peptides. Heck yeah, give me all the peptides. Peptides, please. All the peptides. Yes, please, thank you. This primer is really nice, and when I said Strivectin had a runner-up, ooh, this one is coming for it. It's another one that has really good ingredients. This one's a clean version. Strivectin isn't necessarily a clean certified product, but this one is. It's got good skincare in it. The only thing I'm not a fan of, it's got a fruity scent to it, and I don't need any more scents in my makeup, in my face. Like, I just don't need any more fragrance, please. Why? But it's beautiful. I love the packaging too. I'm a fan of the whole hippie vibe, the whole, it's pretty. It's pretty. This one's way up there right now. Brand new to my life. Only been using it for a little while, week or so, but very much enjoying it. Let's talk about some of the putty primers. I've got two, and I did a whole video comparing side by side the e.l.f. putty primer with the Tatcha Silk Canvas putty primer, and they look very, very similar. Of course, the Tatcha has better ingredients, but the e.l.f. is much less expensive. And I recently picked up from e.l.f. the vitamin C version of their putty primer. I've got all of their putty primers. I love all of their putty primers. I actually really enjoy their putty bronzers and their putty blushes too, but in the primer category, we are talking about primers today. These are really good at blurring texture. They're not as good at blurring pores as some of the other primers are, but they still do a good enough job that I think they are worthy of being mentioned here, especially if you are dealing with both texture and pores. I am on this side of my face. I've got a lot of sun damage right here, and then my pores like to be very visible right here. So I like things that can multi-purpose, and the putty primers do a really good job of that. The vitamin C one also has, of course, vitamin C, so I like that we're getting some skincare involved here. Next up, we've got the old but good Tatcha. Silk Canvas. This one's been around for a minute. It is beautiful and it's awesome. It's very comfortable. It's got a fragrance to it, but it's one of those signature scents that's not too overpowering in my opinion. I enjoy it. I think it does feel like silk on the skin. It is a very, very beautiful primer. Again, it doesn't necessarily blur pores as well as it blurs texture, but it does some blurring of pores, which I like a lot. Then I've got a couple of options that have sunscreen in them, and my favorite of them is from Roche Posay. It's the Anthelios Daily Anti-Aging Primer with Sunscreen. This is an SPF 50, and it feels a lot like your typical silicone primer. The only thing with a product like this is that I would typically only wear my primer, you know, on my cheeks, on my nose, on my chin, and on my forehead, like kind of the T-zone plus my pore areas and my texture areas on my cheeks. I don't usually go in like full face quantity. So if this was the only sunscreen you were wearing, I would just make sure to be careful that you're putting enough product all over your face in all the places to make sure that you're going to get the proper sunscreen coverage. I'm always wearing sunscreen underneath this. I have sunscreen as the last step of my skincare. So even if I'm wearing this primer, I've got another full sunscreen all over my face. So I don't worry about that. But if you were relying on this for sunscreen, be sure that you're applying it everywhere, not just where you would typically prime if you're like me and you don't put your primer all over your face. But it's beautiful. And the last one that I've got here, this one, I picked up a sample of it because I hear a lot about it and a lot of people love it. And so I figured I should try and see what I'm missing. It is the Hourglass Veil Primer. It does have SPF, it's 15, and it does some blurring. It does a little bit of blurring. I don't think it's the best. I don't think it's super blurring, and at SPF 15 for someone like me that's fair-skinned and burns really easily, like I'm never going out with just an SPF 15 on my face. So the SPF in this one doesn't really register on the radar for me, and I don't think it performs as nicely as some of the other ones. However, I like Hourglass products. There's a lot of Hourglass things I do enjoy. I just don't think this primer is my favorite thing. My favorite thing, I got 3 of them. I got my Strivectin, well, I guess I got 4 of them. These are my all-time faves right here. The Strivectin, Lime Blurfector, the Wet n Wild Impossible Primer, the Benefit Pore Professional, and this new one on the block, the Cali Ray So Blown Primer. Although I am a fan of every single one of these, minus the Hourglass. I'm not a big fan of the Hourglass one. The rest of these, I wear them all on a regular basis. I enjoy them very much. I'm actually shooting this video right this moment with this half of my face blurred with the Cali Ray primer. Nothing else on my face and nothing at all on this side of my face. So for the intro, for this talk through, I'm wearing this. I did wash my face with a makeup cleansing cloth in between every single primer that I demoed for you guys. So there you have it. Those are the best of my world in the ones that I have tried. What primers are your favorites for blurring pores? Especially if you're dealing with dry skin. But if you have normal to combo to oily skin, please let us know what you've got and what your favorites are. The more data we can collect, the more information we have to help anyone else that happens upon this video and happens to look down in the comments. So please share what you love and what skin type you are dealing with. As always, thanks a lot for taking some time out of your day to geek out over makeup with me. I appreciate your time, and I hope you guys all have an awesome day or night wherever you are in the world. Take care of each other. Bye-bye.